first question. I'm going to mention the 300-pound gorilla in the room and see what you guys think about this. Mr. Ubele has been described, Mr. Ubele, I'm sorry, in accounts of your candidacy and previous one for mosquito control as a white separatist. I'd be curious to hear from him about what that means and why we should take his candidacy seriously as a result. And I'd be curious to hear from the other two gentlemen about how they feel about sharing the podium with a white separatist.
Does that mean first? What does that mean first? I mean, I'll let it go if it wasn't.
I cannot more fully disagree with any policy that I can think of. I have to be honest, when you said 300-pound gorilla, I thought it had something to do with my incumbent's residency. I don't know, just struck me as where you were going. As far as Mr. Ubele, he's entitled to his opinion, but I don't think that he's entitled to foster it on the rest of the world. I think the United States has moved well beyond those issues. I think Florida has moved beyond those issues. I think the fact that we have an African-American gentleman running for presidency, the presidency this year, shows how far America has come. We have more places to go in that direction, but again, he's entitled to his opinion. He's just not entitled to foster it on anyone else.
Mr. Ubele?
That is an excellent question, and I'm very glad that you asked it here this evening because it will help us to clear some things up. Many of you don't know this, or perhaps some of you do, but our own governor, Charlie Crist, who is white, I believe, is a lifetime member of the NAACP. Now, this membership is something which is glorified and even promoted by the mass media as something which is wholesome and pure. Now, the NAACP stands for National Association for the Advancement of Colored Persons. It's an organization which works for black people's interests. And I'm not against any race of people working for their own group interests. I believe they have a legitimate right and a legitimate duty to do so. But what I do have a problem is this, is when the mass media tries to manipulate public opinion against me because I work for the interests of the majority. That is the issue here. And I'm not going to apologize for doing what I feel is right because it is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be brief. There's just no place for that in today's society. And while we're all entitled to our free expression, and it's why we live in this country, and I respect everyone for having their opinions, it does not belong in our state house. It does not belong in our schoolhouse. It doesn't even belong in the outhouse.
I concur.
I believe I've made my position clear, and there's only one other thing to add to this, folks. There is a black legislative caucus in our state house. There's no white legislative caucus, and if there was, we know what the media would be doing to it. It would be a crucifixion. So please do keep that in mind. Thank you.
And if you want to add anything else on that, Mr. Legg, you got 30 seconds. Okay, not so much. Well then, talk a little bit about parties. The last election cycle cost the Republican Party seats in both the federal House of Representatives and in the state legislature. More of the same may be in store for 2008. What primary errors have Republicans committed at the state and national level that have put their brand in disfavor, and how should they go about correcting them? That would be you.
Thank you very much. That's an excellent question. One of the lessons that I learned many years ago from former Speaker of the House of Daniel Webster, the Speaker of the House Daniel Webster, is you have to remember who you are, and you have to remember what your message is, and you have to remember the people that sent you. The Republicans in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago forgot who they were. It wasn't that I believe that the Democrats were hired. It was that the Republicans were fired because they forgot who sent them to Washington. And the same happens to those that are in Tallahassee. You have to always remember that the people that elect you don't always wear party labels. They look at your ideas, they look at your belief system, and they want to see, do you really believe what you're talking about, and do you really represent them? And at times, the Republican Party, as well as the Democratic Party, have lost who sent them to Tallahassee and Washington. That sent a real wake-up message to me. It sent a wake-up message to many of my colleagues that you have to be true to your principles. Be true to those ideas that you ran on. Don't increase the budget if you're for lower taxes. Don't spend more than you bring in. And we see that on a national level. I firmly believe that the reason why the Republicans that were voted out of Washington, D.C. is they forgot that fundamental principle, is don't spend more than you're bringing in. And I think the voters remembered that, and they fired them to give the Democrats a chance. Now, I firmly believe that if you look at the national polls and you look at Congress's approval ratings, it's hard to believe anyone's approval ratings could be lower than President George Bush's. But there is, and that's Congress's, and that's democratically controlled. So I disagree with the premise that they're upset with Republicans. I believe they're upset with those elected officials that forgets where they come from.
You have 1 minute.
Obviously, the two political parties have many great people in both parties. I've known people that were Democrats and Republicans who worked in the executive committees and even a few at the state level. The problem is that basically the national level, where the parties are taking us. And they're taking us into these needless wars overseas. We're in Iraq. We went in there in lies. We're paying 3 times more for gas now than what we did prior to the Iraq invasion and occupation. We need to leave there. We need to pull our bases back from around the world. And we need to start taking care of Americans instead of going on these costly wars. The entire Iraq War was formulated by AIPAC, which is the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, and they worked in overdrive to get this thing going with their agents in the media and their neocons in George Bush's cabinet, and we're paying one hell of a price for it. And we're going to continue to pay for it until we get control over our government. And that's what we need to do. This political apathy needs to stop. Thank you.